Hey, what's up? This is Pretty Guardian, and I am super excited to kick off 2024 with you by going over my top 10 favorite games from the last year. So, to get our list started off at number 10 is Star Ocean: The Divine Force. This one is a long-running science fiction series published by Square Enix and developed by Tri-Ace. It came out at the tail end of 2022, and so it was actually one of the first big games that I played back in the beginning of 2023. It almost didn't make my list. The biggest reason is that there's just a lot of bugs in it. It was a very unoptimized game. And unfortunately, a lot of times with these sorts of releases, Square Enix and Tri-Ace don't really do a lot of updates. They didn't really work to improve the game that much since launch, and so for that reason, I can't really recommend it. So one of the big systems that it introduced was what they called the Duma system, and it was basically this AI-powered backpack that you had, and it had combat applications, so you could zoom around your enemies and attack them from the sky. And it also had exploration power to it because you were able to zoom up the mountaintops or across a divide or a river or a bridge or just kind of navigate the maps in this new and fun way. And that brings us to number 9 on my list, which is Atelier Liza 2. Basically, you have this young girl who is kind of coming of age and developing her powers as an alchemist. And eventually, it's mostly slice of life, but eventually she does hit this point where she's solving these possibly world-ending problems. So for me, it was a lot of fun. The second game had these really interesting mechanics as far as going through these different ruins and uncovering little bits of history and kind of connecting the dots. It almost felt like true crime or an archaeologist or something like that, just in the way that they would connect all the pieces of what happened at these ancient ruins. But overall, the reason this game is so low on my list is because there was a lot of jank present. The story really wasn't that great. It didn't really do anything that we didn't already see in the first game. There was some improvements to lighting and stuff, but overall I felt the art style wasn't quite as good looking in the second game as it was in the first, but that just might be my personal opinion. But the other thing about it is in the cutscenes and stuff, there was really no animations. Everybody just kind of stood around and talked, which is fine for most of the game, but there were definitely scenes where action should have happened, and it kind of pulled me out that it didn't. Overall, still a good game, and I've actually bought the third one, so that might be a game you see me play in this coming year. At number 8 on my list is Elder Scrolls Online Necrom. So that is their most recent chapter that they released in 2023. They came out with a new class called the Arcanist. And this is a really cool class. It kind of reminds me of D&D's Warlock, because with this one, you basically have this pact with Hermaeus Mora, who is the Daedric god of secrets and knowledge. And so you're able to draw from this eldritch being's power and use that to power your character. And it came with 3 different skill lines, so you have tank, DPS, and support potential from it. It was just a very fun class. Overall, the zone was really nice and inspired. I felt the ending of the story was really good. If you're into Elder Scrolls, if you're playing Elder Scrolls Online, you're gonna want to get to that end because whatever they have coming next just has so much potential to it. I will say my biggest criticism though is that other than that ending that was on point, I felt the story was a little bit lackluster. They were just kind of moving you from set piece to set piece until they could get you to that end. And there's a lot of corners of the game, both in terms of gameplay and mechanics and also the graphics, where after being on the market for 10 years, this game is starting to show its age. It's still beloved by me and I'll continue to play it, but that is kind of why it's at number 8 and not a little further up on my list. At number 7 on my list is another MMORPG. This one is New World: Rise of the Angry Earth. I think that is the stupidest name in the world, but basically they took this zone that was down at the bottom of the map called First Light, and through the events of the game, there is this being named Artemis, who's kind of like analogous to the goddess Artemis. And she just reshapes this entire zone into this Feywild of just magic and possibility. And it's a very cool zone. It's really great music. It had an interesting storyline. Something I will say about New World is that their newer content has surprised me in a couple different moments. It definitely seems like they're trying to step up their storytelling. But what really shines in this new expansion are kind of two new features. First off, they added mounts, which is something that people have been complaining about and wanting from the very beginning. And not only did they give us mounts, but they have dozens of different mounts that you can choose from. And there's like a quest line and a skill line attached to it. So it's not just, oh, here's some cosmetics, here you go. It's actually a gameplay mechanic that you can engage with. And so I thought that that was really fun. And then the other big addition is the weapon, the flail. And so the animations with the flail look amazing. It was super fun to play with. But for me as a healer, the other big deal is that it's a focus-based weapon. So it scales off of the same stat that the rest of my healing scales off of. So for me, this was a completely game-changing feature that they added, and I just had a blast with it. Down to number 6 on my list is the game Diablo IV. I am a huge Diablo fan dating back to like the very first one in the late 90s. I was playing Diablo 1. It scared the shit out of me, but you know, I loved my rogues. I was definitely a sister of the sightless eye and all that. So when Diablo 4 came out, I thought Lilith looked like an incredible villain. And actually, I liked some of the ideologies that she was planting and playing with in the game. I think that they could have done more with that. They were kind of giving her these interesting ideologies and at the same time painting her as this like one-dimensional villain. It was kind of this like odd contrast that I don't think they did a good job bridging the gap on. A lot of the zones were really good. I liked the bosses and the monsters and the gameplay. I would recommend trying out the different classes because depending on which class you pick, even more so than the previous games, I think it's really going to determine what your gameplay experience is going to look like. The only thing I really wish out of this game is that they had just done a little bit better with the story. I feel like they had a really great villain and they just kind of teased things out until the very end. So in a lot of ways, it felt very content light at launch, which is almost understandable. Not that I agree with it, not that I think it's right. I kind of think it's bullshit that this is the state of games today, but it makes sense to me that they would release kind of this sandbox, dark, gritty RPG world and then fill it with content later on. We are halfway through the list. At number 5 is a little indie gem that I wanted to slip into this list, Chained Echoes. It was made by one person, Matthias Linda, and they did a wonderful job with this game. It harkens back to those 90s era 16-bit JRPGs, kind of reminds me of like the obvious example I think would be Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, kind of games that are in that vein. But it was just so much fun. The combat is turn-based. They had this whole like reward board of like achievements that you can unlock that would give you different perks. There were kind of like skill trees present in the game. It was a lot more in-depth than you would expect from a game designed after a game in that era. In a lot of ways, I think this one was even better than Sea of Stars that came out after. Very impressed that it was developed by one person. Very much looking forward to seeing what kind of games they develop in the future. At number 4 on my list is the monster catching MMORPG Temtem. So when I play this game, all I can think is like how embarrassed Game Freak should be about the state of the current Pokemon games. Because by and large, they suck. The graphics are uninspired, the gameplay is stale, like they are just not where they should be. And there's so many like bugs and crap too. There's no voice acting, there's nothing about these modern Pokemon games that are demanding a AAA price tag other than the fact that you're paying for more Pokemon. So if you want to pay for more Pokemon but actually get a good experience out of it, you should definitely check out Temtem. So within the gameplay itself, one of the things that sets it apart is rather than have just one monster on the battlefield, you actually have two. So they're able to use skills that support and build off of each other. And I actually really enjoy that. There's a lot more synergies and strategy that can happen because the balance is geared around these Temtem actually interacting with each other, rather in Pokemon where you just have kind of a 1v1 situation happening. The other thing with this game is that it has so many different systems built in there. We've got housing, we have shops where you can go and buy clothes and customize your avatar. There are battles that you can have with players. There's just a lot of like good stuff happening here. The only thing that I didn't really love about it is I felt like the storyline was really good up until that last act of the game, where it kind of fell apart and felt a little rushed. And it kind of made me wonder if that was like them running out on budget, or they didn't quite know how to wrap up the game. Or given the fact that it's an MMORPG, maybe they didn't really want people to settle into that ending very much. They wanted you to kind of get quickly pushed through it and into the end game content. Either way, it's a fun game and I would highly recommend it. That's like my thing. I'm gonna criticize every game on this list, but then I'm gonna tell you it's a fun game and I loved it anyway. At number 3 on my list is the game Marvel's Midnight Suns. I had made a review about this game a little bit ago, but basically it's a strategy game, it's turn-based, and you get this really good roster of Marvel heroes to fight also Lilith, kind of like Diablo IV. But basically in this one, Lilith is arriving as a Herald of Chthon, and your character is the Hunter. You are the son or daughter of Lilith, brought back from the past to fight her in modern times. And one of the things I loved about this game was the roster of heroes that you got. We had the people that you would expect, like Captain America and Captain Marvel. You know, we got the captains on one side, but then there were also some characters that I didn't necessarily expect. Like we got to play as Magic or Robbie Reyes' version of Ghost Rider. He was super cute and I loved him. I played this game on Xbox, and the thing that almost kind of killed it for me were the loading screens. The combat and the out of combat sections of the game are like completely separate. You engage with the combat through like a mission system where you go to this war table, you select the mission, and then you're just instantly ported in, basically. There's just like these long loading screens between everything that you do. And at least for me on Xbox, it almost made it unplayable. If the gameplay and the story and the characters were not so engaging, I don't know if I would have made it through this one, but I'm glad that I did because I loved it and I had a great time. This one I would recommend, maybe check it out on like PC or on PlayStation or something like that, that maybe has a little more capacity to get through those loading screens faster than my Xbox did. And we are down to the last 2 games on my list. These 2 games are like near and dear and precious to my heart, and I will sing their praises for years to come. At number 2, we have the game Baldurs Gate 3. Now, if you know me, you might be like, wait, what bitch? How did Baldurs Gate 3 not get number 1? Well, the number 1 game, it was just that good for me, but Baldurs Gate 3 is fantastic. The graphics are beautiful, the story is beautiful, and you can tell that Larian has just grown so much in their ability to thread these different plot lines together and just create a really amazing game. Combat is tactical and turn-based and borrows heavily from the D&D 5e rule set. There are some slight changes that are made just to like improve the gameplay and help it translate into a computer game better. But this is probably the closest to like a digital D&D experience that you can really have at this stage. And one of the things that I love about Larian is that they continue to support and improve their games. So an example in this recent update is that they added epilogues. A lot of people were complaining about the endings for some of these characters' stories. And so I imagine Larian probably had it in the works already. They came out with these epilogues that just add a little bit more to the story and give you a more clear and better ending for the characters that you've grown to love in this campaign. It took me about 80 hours to go through my first playthrough, and there's a couple more that I want to do based on different classes that look interesting and also some of the background stories that are available. One of the things that I think is so incredible about this game is that the maps are just filled. They're filled with different quest lines, stories, characters, NPCs, items, treasure chests, things that you can find, things that you can do, things that you can interact with. And depending on the choices that you make, you could have a wildly different playthrough experience. So my first playthrough that I did, I basically let all the horrible stuff happen to my character, and it still had a very interesting outcome. And that's also one of the reasons that I'm excited to replay it, because there were a lot of characters that honestly did not make it with me till the end, and I'd be interested in seeing what their like third act stories and everything are like. But without further ado, the game that you all have been waiting for is my number one. It is my time at Sandrock. This is a cozy adventure RPG. It is a crafting simulation sort of game. Your character is a builder coming to this small town of Sandrock. It's out in the desert. You have to conserve water. You can't chop down the trees. You have to be very careful about how you manage your resources. But you're basically helping the people in this small town to develop their town. You know, fix up the water tower, make the buildings look nice, help the people survive in kind of this harsh and cruel climate. One of the things that I really love about this game is, for me in the real world, one of my big fears in life has to do with climate change. A couple years ago in the city of Portland, our Willamette River was practically drained because of how hot it was. We're getting these heat bubbles that are destroying gardens, destroying crops. Our planet is just becoming less and less hospitable because of capitalism and all the horrible things that we're doing to it. But what I like about this game is there's a sort of solar punk aesthetic to it. It gives a glimpse into a potential future where we can still find ways to sustain ourselves in a planet that is becoming less and less hospitable. But it's also a kind version of that future where the people are choosing peaceful solutions and trying to help each other and trying to recycle and conserve water and take these steps to keep their community thriving. And to see that there is a peaceful future that could happen in a post-apocalyptic world, for me, that was just a very comforting thought. And overall, I think it's a beautiful game. I would highly recommend it. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing what the future My Time games are. This is part of a series. There was My Time at Portia, and now this is the second one. And they just improved on everything. It's a better story, it's better graphics, way more involved gameplay and RPG elements. You do have skill trees and different weapons and gear sets that you can equip, different monsters and dungeons to explore. My biggest criticism of the game, and this is like criticism light, is the fact that it takes over 100 hours to get through the storyline. Depending on your play style, this could easily be like 140 to 200 hour game. And I think that if they had scaled the story back 15%, I think that it would have made the game more approachable for a lot of people. And they could have taken that 15% and put it into some of the other systems that feel like they're a little bit lighter than they should be. Like, give people some more decoration, give people some more crafting, give people some more like RPG skill trees and that sort of stuff. So thank you so much for going through this list with me. 2023 was a phenomenal year in gaming, and I am very much looking forward to 2024. So until next time, this is Pretty Guardian, logging out.